So we are live?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. And here we come with yet another episode of the Global Empathy Circle, a circle of sisterhood, a circle of soulfulness, and a circle of empathy. Our objective remains the same, which is to bring to you some nuggets, some wisdom, some insights, and some deep corners of our own heart, which we want to share with the world so that maybe somewhere, from some corner of the world you are sitting at, you might find it relevant, you might find it meaningful, and you might find something that resonates deeply with those inside corners of our own hearts. Today, we have the moderator of the evening, Ratna. Ratna is from the UK and she has been a brave, courageous, soulful sister from all across the seven seas for many of us here. And it is my delight to introduce her to you and to bring to you the topic for today, which is the courage to be vulnerable. I am Shinjini Sengupta. I am the National President of the Mentoring and Soft Skills sector of WICCI. I am also the founder of Lighthouse, where I teach storytelling, change making, and creative leadership. I run programs where I deal with many of the topics which are also close to the global empathy circle, and vulnerability and courage definitely sits at the core of it. So today, I welcome to you and I welcome Ratna to be able to share with us her courage and her vulnerability and share some stories from the insides of all of our collective hearts. Over to you, Ratna.
Thank you, Sinjini. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, and welcome to everybody who's watching today and all of these beautiful ladies that are joining me as well. Courage to be vulnerable, such a big topic. It's really scary also, and that's what usually holds us back, our fear. But today, we have so many women on this call right now from the UK, from Australia, myself partly from Germany and the UK and India. And as Sinjini said, I've been quite blessed to be coming across the seven seas as well. So I've had to be vulnerable and courageous in all kinds of cultures as well. And that should not be underestimated. Daring and to have courage and vulnerability. Vulnerability isn't about losing or winning. It's having the courage for each of us to actually show up, even when we know we don't have any control over it as well. When we're vulnerable, we show our stories to everybody. And most of our stories all come with some kind of fear, shame, coming out of our comfort zone, and being scared as well. But the courageous thing about vulnerability is about being kind to ourselves, being our authentic us. And a lot of the education system, the corporate world that we have nowadays, we usually put in a box, and we actually diminish the ability of others to be vulnerable, because when people have a voice and don't like what they hear about you, or it doesn't resonate with somebody, we quickly go away and conform to the norms of what society thinks. Each of the ladies on here, I know, have lots of wisdom. They have lots of stories, whether it's through work, but also personal stories of courageous steps that they've taken. And I'm going to ask each one of them to share something about themselves, because sharing a story, sharing a vulnerability is what connects us all as human beings. So I'd like to come over to Celia first. Celia, could you share with us, has there been a moment when you've had to be courageous, you've had to do something totally out of your comfort zone, and maybe share how did it feel to take that step? But I'm really interested in what did it feel like afterwards for you and anyone else that you might have impacted as well. Celia.
Thank you, Ratna. There's probably many answers that many times of vulnerability or taking the step out of the normal life choices that other people might balk at. what I'll probably share with you is a really major life change that was prompted by a very strong guidance of intuition. And I was living in one state with a great business, family, young family. And there was one point, and as some people know, in my spiritual work, I've learned to really listen to the intuition. But even then, sometimes the intuition could push you to do something very much out of the comfort zone, very out of the normal life, and you would question it deeply, which I have done. Anyway, there was one point where I was basically intuitively told, held down energetically in a chair and told to move from where we live, pack up the business, move from where we lived and move to another state for a variety of reasons. And I listened deeply and then went about completely pulling ourselves out of our town, our house, our business. Luckily, I had a husband and kids that all just followed and trusted this process that was going on. And I had no idea what I was going to, what was waiting for us. We just all went for a big life adventure. Now, it was interesting when we arrived, all the perfect things just synchronized together to open up doorways, pathways of work. And yet in that time, I was going back to a place that I'd lived many, many years prior. And what I found most fascinating was, as much as taking that step, there was this feeling of being terrifiedly excited. And that usually says to me that you're right on the perfect path to make incredible change. So to me, that benchmark is always, I'm terrified, but I'm excited. I'm not just terrified. There is anticipation of something really different to come. And the incredible thing happened was I ended up running into about 3 or 4 prime people that had been in my life many years prior in that same town. And I didn't have the knowledge and the wisdom. There was some of my spiritual nature at that time. But this time when I went, those 3 to 4 people, I think it was definitely 3, all turned up in the same town in the same week, relocating from somewhere overseas as well. And then when I got to talk to them, I was able to engage more on the spiritual level, on the mentorship level, on using my abilities with the energetic healing to support them. And in return, there was really precious messages to me. So for me, it was my own spirit demanding that I go back and do that growth period and the proper exchange, the higher exchange that I completely missed because I was a bit of a party girl at that time. So I was able to go back as more a mature woman, more mature mentor in the spiritual studies and completely change that. Now, of course, it came a time where the family desperately kind of wanted to go back to the hometown. And then I was the one that was left grieving and feeling very vulnerable to return because I was finding myself in a beautiful space of connectivity and meaning in my life at that time, which I did. And of course, I'm again in another space where I've just uprooted myself again and changed my life again according to intuition. And so I'm in another path right at this moment, working through different levels of vulnerability, having to move house every now and then, like 4 houses in 2 years, being a lot of upheaval. But in the meantime, I think my belief in myself, my trusting of the intuition that comes into me has helped give that balance of mind as I process through. So.
Lovely. Wow. That's really brave. I love the word intuition because that's something that we really underestimate. And the intuition, you know, we always have this saying, listen to your gut. And we say it, we don't always think about it, and we're scared to listen to our gut. But when all the processes don't work, that's all we have is our gut. And when we learn to trust ourselves, that's when the intuition can kick in. And what beautiful space can we open up as well? So my question, Celia, to you is,
Yes.
you know, you must have had many people giving you pushback, in maybe your family or friends thinking, are you crazy, Celia, for doing this? Because that's sometimes the fear of actually taking that step as well. Did you have that?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of craziness because you're leaving a complete business that you'd built up for, at that time, probably 10 to 12 years. And it didn't make sense to anybody else. Why would you do that? And especially family members who would question, why would you move the kids everywhere and go to the unknown? What I did find and what we found as a family when we came back, our action to follow the magic of the intuition and just go for it and dare to do life differently had quite a few of our clients, when we did return to the hometown, start to take that same risk. They suddenly started all making these wild decisions that didn't make sense to anybody else, but they had an adventure of their lifetime. And if that was part of the whole path, was to liberate other people to be a little bit wilder like I tend to live my life, then that was fantastic.
That's amazing. You know, when you touch other people's lives as well, to get them to do something, the power of intuition and multiplicity as well. Thank you, Celia. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Okay, so, you know, sometimes we have to dare to speak up for other people as well. When you see something wrong being done and it doesn't sit with your value system, does it get on your nerves? Are we brave enough to speak up? Or do we sit on the sidelines with everybody else and think somebody else might speak up? And I know, Siobhan, you've had that kind of experience of, you know, speaking up for somebody else. What did it feel like to do that? And what was your actual driver to really stand up and say, I'm going to dare to say something, even if somebody else doesn't? Because I think this is a really important part that we can all help each other with in the world.
Thank you, Ratna. The example that I've got really is a few years ago now, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and I just got a new job and I'd just been promoted, and I was literally on my first day in the new job, and it was a full team meeting, and a member of staff that I was going to be managing, I'd spoken to them once, had a really good reason for turning up late, because we work with people that are very vulnerable, so there was a really good reason why that member of staff should turn up late. I discussed it with the senior manager, everything had been agreed. It turned out, I didn't know this at the time, but this particular senior manager turned out and probably will forever be the worst person I've ever been managed by. I don't think anybody could be any worse, to be honest, but it was all agreed and it was all arranged, and the staff member came in, and there'd been a sort of like little sort of like warm-up exercise that we'd all been doing, and he said, can you go and sit over there in the corner and complete the warm-up exercise? I was like, oh, that's not how we treat people, is it? We're all grown-ups here. We don't sit in the corner and so like everybody else in the room, because I didn't know this at the time, everybody else in the room was used to him and just all put their heads down. So I thought, this is like not a good situation here. And then you do have, because I'm human and you do think these things, for that little minute I thought, I'm brand new, it's my first day, this is my new manager, he's a bit of a taskmaster. I didn't realise kind of what he was like at that point. And then you think, am I now going to knock my own career chances here? Am I now going to go this, oh, just keep quiet, Siobhan, because he's going to give you, it's going to sort of like, this is going to impact on you. How's that? And I sat there for like that sort of like few split seconds, because you do think that. And then I thought, actually, no, because this is wrong. You don't treat people like that. That's not how you treat people. I was not brought up to accept that that's how you treat people. I need to say something now, because looking at the other person, she was so vulnerable that I thought she can't speak up for herself. You can just see for somebody, for whatever their reasons were. I know now what those reasons are, but I didn't know it at the time. But you could just see that person was not vulnerable, was too vulnerable to speak up for themselves. So I said, no. And everybody in the room went, ooh. Someone said no. And it was kind of like, which then kind of like put me on the back foot a bit, because then I'm thinking, oh, maybe I made a bad decision. Maybe I should just shut up. And then I thought, actually, you shouldn't just shut up. Don't do it. That's not who you are. And I think that's the thing for me, is that's not who I am. If somebody, I was always brought up, and my sort of like values are, if somebody is in a situation where they're vulnerable and they can't stand up for yourself, whether that's your sisters, your family members, your friends, whoever, if you're in a position to, even if it makes you a little bit vulnerable, you should be the person who does that. You should step up and you should speak up for somebody. So I said, yes, come and sit down to the person. So there was a little bit of a wrangle, and in the end the person decided she wanted to be on my side, obviously, because she didn't have to go and sit in a corner on her own, did she? So she came and sat down. So immediately the meeting was over, he said to me, can I have a word with you? And by this point I was ready. I was like, yes, you can have a word with me now, because this is not acceptable the way. So we had a conversation, shall we say, in private, and it probably didn't affect as much as I thought it might. It didn't affect my career chances, because this is one person, and I think that sometimes you have that rush, don't you, where you go, oh God, this is going to really affect everything, everything's going to go downhill. But it's that moment of fear, like we were talking about before. It's that moment of fear, but then you go, do I allow the fear to take me over, or do my actual own values and being the authentic me, do they kick in, and do they do the thing that we should do? Consequently, and the other thing that I think is, it makes you feel better. It's scary. It's like it's a bit, suppose, like what Celia was saying before. There's that kind of like being terrified and being excited. It's not sort of like excited in that way, but it's kind of like being. I was a bit scared, because you're thinking, wow, on my first day here with a new job, I've just been promoted, new manager, and here's me opening my big mouth straight off the bat. So there is that kind of fear, but there's that kind of, no, this is right. This is what I should do. This is how you should behave. Consequently, the other thing for the person who I stood up for, there was lots of sort of like reasons personally going on for her. She was just really vulnerable at that time. She just didn't have that strength in her at that particular moment to be able to go, excuse me, I don't think that's acceptable. And we had a conversation later on when a post came up, a further post came up, and she said to me, oh, I said, are you going for it? Because she was really good. And she went, I don't think I will. So I said, why? She went, oh, I can give you 10 reasons why they wouldn't give it to me. So I said, well, I can give you 20 reasons why they would. And she was like, oh, right. And then she came back to me and she said, do you know what? I'm going to go for it. So I said, good. I said, why? What's changed your mind? She went, one thing that changed my mind, and this was like 18 months later. One thing that changed my mind was, when I said I've got 10 reasons why I can't, you said you got 20. You didn't even say 11, you said 20. She said, so that made me feel confident. She said, and then also I thought, all that time ago, on that first time that I properly met you, you stood up for me. And that gave me confidence then. So like 18 months later, when I'd forgotten all about this, and it's like it's a done deal for me, isn't it? Because it's happened and it's gone, and that manager had left, and there'd been a various other things. But sometimes you don't realise in your one sort of like, accepting your own vulnerability, going, okay, I feel a bit vulnerable here, but I've got to do this because I think it's the right thing. But much further down the line, that can have an impact for somebody. And that person, she's now quite a senior manager herself, that person had remembered that something, that I had done something that had made her feel supported, that had made her feel less vulnerable, and that is something that had given her confidence. So I just think it's that sometimes in your own, modelling your own vulnerability, you're actually giving someone else the permission to kind of open up and to take that little leap of faith for themselves.
Oh, I love that. I love that. The fact, we talked about this a few weeks ago, didn't we? A small act of kindness doesn't matter how small it is, it can resonate, and the consequence of it can come in that moment, or it can come, like you said, a few years later, Siobhan.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, what's the worst that can happen if I speak up? But in our minds, we're already 10 steps ahead, thinking about what's going to happen, instead of going, in this moment, let me do it. And in that next moment, when the consequence happens, I will deal with that then. And then we can reel ourselves back instead of reeling ourselves fast forward, and our brain's going at 10 to the dozen, and it's totally out of control as well. Amazing.
And I think sometimes you have to, sometimes you have to do that thing, don't you? You go like, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission.
Absolutely.
I've done it now. If I was wrong, I was wrong. I'll ask for forgiveness and I'll say that I was wrong. But
exactly. Thank you, Siobhan, for sharing. I'd like to come over to Susan now. Susan has her professional career. She does a lot of speaking. She influences people without actually knowing. And I know her to be very vulnerable, to share a lot of things. And sometimes we don't actually know the impact that's vulnerability when we're being so scared. I know there's people on this call, and she's one of them, who's been very vulnerable and has really inspired a lot of people. But Susan, what's one of the ones that you'd like to share with everybody else right now?
Bless you. That's very kind. So I was going to say about my speaking journey, actually. It started in 2016, and at that point, I'd never spoken in public, never done anything of that sort. I'd kind of made this decision on a holiday that I'd gone with because I got encouragement from somebody else that was on the holiday. You know, let's go and become a motivational speaker, or let's just go and do something. And it was just a decision out of nowhere. But the first thing about that is you're like, who am I to do that? Who am I to even do anything like that? And when you're becoming vulnerable enough to put yourself out there and you're not feeling good enough, it's kind of a little bit mishmash. So then you kind of think, okay, I've got to go and do something about it. So if I really wanted to do this, the first thing of being vulnerable was I signed up for, I went to Toastmasters. I think a lot of you know that I was a member of Toastmasters. And showing up there, then I needed kind of an aim, something that would push me, something that, and I love what Celia said, because I truly believe if you can find something that scares you and excites you, that's what you're chasing. And the amount of growth that comes when you can find that magic. So when I started Toastmasters, I needed a name, and I knew that at work there was a support group for salaried women that worked in the company to try and encourage and motivate the staff to take leadership positions. So the first thing really, and it was a simple thing, but I'd never done it, was email one of the highest managers in the company, a lady, saying, I want to talk at this event. And it's not, they usually get paid speakers from outside. And I had no experience. She didn't really know who I was. And I just said, I want to talk. When's the next time I can? And 4 months later, that's what my Toastmasters was building me up to. But every time I went to speak, there was the element of, why on earth am I doing this? What is this about? But there's another part that was like really exciting and I really want to do it. But that first one, I personally thought flopped, absolutely flopped. Because when I was at Toastmasters, you go to this audience and they're like so welcoming, they're listening. Oh yeah, well done, right? They're so supportive. You go into the real world and you're sitting in front of you're standing in front of 200 people. They are only there because they're getting a day off their day job. They are not interested in what you have to say. So I stand there looking at them and I get distracted myself. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, that one's picking their nose, that one's on their phone. Oh, why am I at the front talking to these people? Who am I still to talk to these people? And I must have been silent for a little bit too long. I literally forgot why I was there, why I was standing there. And I'm so caught up in my thoughts about them picking their noses. And then I'm like, oh, they're looking at me and I need to talk. So after that, I absolutely crucified myself in my brain. You're crap, you're useless. Look, you pushed yourself out of your comfort zone and you failed. And then it was, because it was a motivational event, they had these, I think she was the CEO of Morgan Stanley, and she's recorded. She was at a Costco event in the US. And then she's like giving this powerful speech about, you go out there, you make mistakes and you get up again and you carry on. And I was like, it's just what I really needed to hear right now. But from that moment, because I would have said, you push yourself, you just fail. And I could have just gone into a box. But that real self-talk afterwards and actually being encouraged by that video that they were displaying meant that the next 2 years were absolute magic. And the thing I was chasing, and the thing that you do become vulnerable, but I started chasing that scared yet excited feeling. So I went for a competition and suddenly you're through, and suddenly you get through to the next round, and suddenly you're on a stage in Ireland at a national competition, speaking massively out of your comfort zone. But the amount of growth that happened. And then not only in the out of work mode, but when I was at work, suddenly a position became available. Suddenly I was, right, go for it, just go for it. Like I was having to talk to 100 management, that it was really different type of talk. You have to be really serious, you have to be like this. And I was massively out of my comfort zone. But each time, what is it? So what is it that makes you do it? Because we talk ourselves out of it, right? So I would say it really comes down to facing your fear. There's something you would love to do, and the only reason that really stops you is because you don't want to get vulnerable enough to share that you might absolutely muck this up, and it's fear. So when it comes to fear, the three things that I would say that helped me was, what's the worst that's really going to happen? Look at it real logic. What is going to happen? What's the worst case scenario? And play every single thing through. Yes, you fail. Yes, you lose your words. Yes, you're rubbish. You get sacked. You get shunned off stage. You get booed off stage. Can you live with it? Ooh, who's phoning Sinjini? Sinjini, will you share? Will you share? We can hear you.
So sorry.
That's all right. I'm probably going on anyway. Anyway, so yeah, what's the worst that's going to happen? Let me. I did write it down, so let me just. Logically, what are your fears? You can think, I'm going to go up there and I don't know, you're going to skydive and I'm going to die. But logically, how many people are skydiving and they're not dying? I'm going to go in public speak and it's going to be the worst thing ever. Well, logically, is that really going to be the worst thing ever? Probably not. So what's the worst that's going to happen? Think about it logically. And the exciting one for me is, that real nervous feeling, that real, I've got to do it, is if you can change your mindset and get that to excitement rather than nerves, that is precious. That is so precious. But anyway, I think I've gone on a lot.
No, not at all.
So I'll hand back to you. It's a massive topic, but I would definitely say, to become so vulnerable, there is nothing for you to hide. Face your fear, get out there and chase the excitement.
Absolutely. That's amazing, Susan. And no, you haven't gone on too long. This is what we need. We need people to know it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to fail. Because we say so many times, it's only through failure that we actually learn what we can actually do as well. But like you said, being in a box, even on this camera, on this world that we have in COVID of being in a box, we're so vulnerable to show that. But I know many people during COVID who have, even though they're in a box on these Zoom calls, they're actually becoming more and more vulnerable to tell their stories. And who would have thought that 12 months ago at all? The fact we're all sat here sharing that our vulnerabilities to help each other and be kind to each other and to be kind to ourselves as well. That's amazing.
I think you're right. And I think actually another thing that sometimes happens is when you become vulnerable and the worst stuff happens, right? I know a lot of you know already that the family disowned me at some point in my life. When the worst thing happened for me at that time, there is nothing that anything ever can happen again and you're never going to get that bad again. Absolutely. Because it was suddenly like you realize there was a bigger thing looking after you. And that's very empowering.
Absolutely. And I think it strengthens, fear actually strengthens to find out who you really are.
Yeah.
Because until that fear is there, you don't know how to dig deep. And the universe and other people are there to help you dig deep as well. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to come over to Jabba, and Jabba's joined our call for the first time, so I'm really pleased to welcome her, and we've had a little bit of an introduction. And Jabba, I'm sure you're absolutely going to be able to share many stories about vulnerability and daring to be courageous because of what you do for a living, but I'm sure there's personal stories that you probably want to share. So could you share at least one thing that you think could inspire other people to dare courageously as well?
Thank you, Ratna. And I'll take this opportunity after setting a context for two things that I really would like to share. And whatever has been said so far about vulnerability, one thing that really helped me overcome my fear of vulnerability is, I think, passion. And when you are passionate about something, as we have read in the book Alchemist, the universe conspires to make it happen. And if you can trust the universe, it does happen. So let me now bring it to my personal story. Yes, I heard something in a line, in a sentence, though I don't know, Susan, about being disowned by the family. So I also got disowned by the family once when I wanted to marry a man of my choice, and only to have a runaway marriage and then lose him in 5 years' time in less than 10 seconds when I was expecting our first child. So I think, I don't know which one needed more courage. Did the disownment of the family for a year, or whether it was losing my soulmate? I didn't know which one would require more courage. However, there are two things that stand out against this context. Since my daughter, who I just referred to before the before it went live, since my daughter was born after my husband passed away, I wanted to share one value of his life, not by just sharing stories about him, but by bringing it alive in some other form. And I thought of setting up a foundation for a cause which my husband was passionate about. And I had zero passion about that cause, zero knowledge, and zero awareness as well. So that was wildlife conservation and animal welfare, which my husband was very passionate about. And so came up a foundation called Venu Menon Animal Allies Foundation. And for that, to express myself to someone who could give the support in terms of knowledge and all the resources that requires to set up a foundation, and not just set up a foundation, but have national awards being given away at a level where the head of the state, like the prime minister, the president, every year gave away the award. And the animal activist, who is Mrs. Maneka Gandhi, who was also a minister at that time, had no connect to any of them, and walking into their offices or even their homes and stating my passion about starting this and seeking their support, I have no idea today how I did it. I went to each one's residence or office after taking an appointment. My husband was not a public figure. I was not a public figure. Firstly, to go through the nightmare of seeking an appointment, because meeting them was easier than seeking an appointment with them. And going through the nightmare without a visiting card, without almost a nobody, seeking their time, and then asking for their support for the foundation, which would give away the awards to animal activists every year. So I think my expression of vulnerability, they just did it. I can't think of any other reason. And there was not a single year for 10 years that Mrs. Maneka Gandhi, who is still a parliamentarian and then a minister, did not give the keynote address. She marked it on her calendar for a person she had never known in her life and honored the occasion every single year without fail. And some of the people who gave memorial speeches were of the stature of David Shepard, in case you know of him in the art world, or Virginia McKenna, who was the leading actress of Born Free. So they came down to India every year to deliver memorial addresses. And all this happened. I did not personally achieve all of it, but the universe conspired, as I said, to make it happen. But taking the first few steps to set up a foundation from a nobody with zero resources besides my salary. And I do recall the days when I had to not sleep all night, but stick postage stamps to send invites and ask for support to do it for hundreds of people. So that to seek support for something that you don't know how it would pan out, not know anything about the field per se, and expressing yourself that you have a passion to do this, I think required some courage and some vulnerability. So that's one piece that I wanted to talk about. And as I'm talking about it, I can feel the passion running in my blood, actually.
I can feel it too, Jabba. Wow.
And the second one was, of course, which is not very uncommon, was, after 3 decades of a very comfortable, stable corporate assignment or a social sector assignment, and having worked with someone who you have 100% comfort with, after having worked with such a person for 13 years, to have the courage, literally it required my prayers for 3 months or so to just have the courage and go up to him and tell him one day that I don't think I want to take up this role any longer. Now my calling is one thing of the 3 things that I was doing in my corporate career, and which is people development. And that is what I would like to do now 100% and not as 1/3 of my KRA. It took a lot of courage, although it was going to be my loss of paycheck every month, but the relationship that I had with my organization and the relationship that I had with my supervisor, to go up to him and tell him this one fine morning that I think I don't want to pursue this any longer because it would not support me in terms of time and in terms of, you know, what I really want to do for the rest of my life, because I think that is what has helped me retain my sanity, which is support from someone who was empathetic, support from someone who has been playing an unofficial mentor's role, or a support from someone who has been my cheerleader without having been paid a penny. That is what has made me who I am. And that is what has influenced in a very big way how my daughter has been brought up too. And can I do that to thousands of people now? If I don't start now, I'll never have the courage and the ability to do it. My voice that you are not perfect I will unwillingly succumb to that. So before that happens, let me just take this plunge, not have a salary at the end of every month, with the same responsibility of paying the check or every bill for 5 people that I have been responsible for the last, single-handedly responsible for the last 25 years. None of it has changed. And maybe I will fail. But for the last 3 years, I have not failed, but maybe I will fail. And it's okay to fail, but I must give it a shot, just like I gave the foundation a shot. So that's what are 2 of my little stories about courage and vulnerability. Thank you for offering to hear it. And I like the fact that I'm being heard by women like you.
I'm very blessed to also hear you as well, Jabba. So honestly, welcome to our team, our global network here as well. And I love it. Passion.
Thank you.
When you have passion, you become a magnet for everybody. Everybody cannot resist a passionate person. You may not get to inspire everybody. We have this big vision in our head that we have to have everybody. But even if we just inspire ourselves and we can inspire one person, the universe does the rest of it. I truly believe that. I've had those experiences as well. And it's magnetic. And I think you've said something really, really important. Susan said it. Everybody has said it so far. Who am I? We live in the fear of, who am I to say anything? But if you didn't say any of those things, would you right now have that foundation would you have had the courage to say, I don't need a paycheck. I'm going to let myself free because I want to actually inspire so many other people as well. Thank you, Jabba. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to come over. Let's welcome Sinjini, who's our president of the WICCI Mentoring and Soft Skills. I'm sure, Sinjini, you have many things that you can share with us personally or from your career. Share one of the most courageous things that you've done to show vulnerability or inspire yourself or inspire anybody else as well.
Thank you so much, Ratna. And before I even open my mouth, I bow down in respect to each one of you, and especially the last story that we heard. It gave me goosebumps. It was truly a story of coming to power, and I think the only thing that stands between us and our best self is that fear. And once we have worked that out, everything else falls in place. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this very strong topic. And also, after these stories that have been told, my story perhaps appears very vanilla and very plain. I have been very privileged, and I feel very grateful as I speak now. I'm full of gratitude because I haven't had it as difficult as most of you. Having said that, courage and vulnerability are two words that perhaps are not taught in the school textbook, but they wrap around our lives, they wrap around our very existence. They enter and seep into the core of our heart and challenges us in every living, sleeping, waking, breathing moments. I resonated a lot with many of the things that have been said already in terms of power, vulnerability, courage. And truth be told, I wish I was more courageous. Life, as they say, you remember you have one life when you are reborn, when you remember that you have one life. Now, many people take it as a leap of courage, as a leap of faith. For me, I often say that it was not courage, it was a catastrophe. Because for the longest time, I was pushing aside all those soft voices and all those inner lights or intuitions or all the nice words we call it now. Something inside you nudging you and telling you there's more to life than what you are doing right now. And it's been forever that you are doing that. And what I have been doing is really to eat out of and live out of my university degree and my long years of investment into my career. Therefore, there is this standard, going to office every day, coming back home exhausted, collapsing on the bed, getting up every morning and going back to work. I have been doing that for a long time until I could not. I broke down physiologically with a number of conditions, which essentially brought me to also understand how the mind and the body are connected. Because I first thought those are just a bad, blood test gone wrong. So, 2 weeks of diet and I will be back on my feet. But no, broken spine, fibromyalgia, you call it gut feeling. So my liver, when I stopped to listen to my gut feeling, my liver refused to listen to me. So it developed its own conditions. So a number of things. And if you go back to how it all developed, I think the word that would be most appropriate is a vicious cycle. So one thing leading to another thing, leading to yet another thing, spinal problems because of the long hours, etc., leading to nervous problems, leading to major depressive disorder, leading to fibromyalgia. And you cannot tell which is psychosomatic and which is physiological and which is emotional. But having said that, I think, and given the overthinker that I am, I, of course, did a lot of digging deep into why me, and, the 5 whys, or, what else, what now. At one point, I was told by the doctor that I was one step away from quadriplegia. And at that point, I had to take at least a little break from my career to be able to recover and then go back to work if I would. For me, that was unthinkable, because I have grown up, I have been brought up on a psychology. What is good for my career? Nobody at home asked me who I'm going to marry, or, no other aspirations, nothing else. I didn't care if I had, breakout of pimple on my skin, nothing else. I was always a very studious and academic and career oriented aspirational person, not money, but career success, So a very, very, horses blind kind of a person. And it came to me as a shock. I was like, how can I live if I do not work? And if I don't get that SMS at the end of the month on my phone? From that, and from the deepest pit of, vulnerability, if I may, where I really did not hope to see 2020. I thought I would be long gone by this time. From that point, that soft voice started to get louder and louder. And what was once a vicious cycle, eventually, again, maybe the universe conspires, meeting the right people, going the right way, or even the wrong way, the detours, which appear to be the right way, because without those detours, I won't be able to come back to myself as much. What started was a virtuous cycle. So one thing led to the other, one opportunity led to another, one big one I thought never possible, then yet a bigger one. So these things happen to many of us. We all know that once we start listening to our heart, it happens almost to everybody, because there's this strange force that wraps us and keeps us safe, even if we think that we are taking a plunge. I often talk about it like a treasure map, that only if you take the next step, after that the next one will appear. You won't know the entire path, but you would know what is right now. And if you do that, then you know what is right after that, and so on. So standing now, and given how more than my life, how my mentality and my temperament and my life's purpose and my calling has shaped up, I want to reflect back to something that was already said in this session: the need to be seen and to be heard. I think that is something that is very biological and very core and human to our very being, the need to be seen and heard for who we are. I mean, who am I is perhaps a philosophical, abstract, spiritual question. People go up the mountains to be able to solve that and still cannot. I just don't want to go there, because that's a loop. But whatever I am feeling for now, there is no shame. I mean, it's legitimate. It's okay. And just to be able to give us permission to feel that it's okay. There's nothing to hide. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm fine just the way I am. I'm broken, but I'm fine, because it's only normal to be fine. That being seen and to be heard, I think, did magic to me. Also, again, to reflect back on what Shiobhan said about vulnerability and standing up for somebody else. So I have been there. I have shared this in one of the earlier episodes where, while I was pregnant, there was this huge, so the way I was treated at work was brought me down. And so all of that happened when I was vulnerable. But then there was a time when I was the manager, and this new girl who was sent into my team. So start of the year, I get my new team, and there's this new girl who is just back from the maternity break. And 2 months down the line, the first appraisal comes to me, and her report says that she has been rated badly because last year she was not here in work. Even though she has taken her legitimate maternity leave, but the hours, obviously, the percentages are all right, but they would look at absolute numbers. And the fight I put up for her, I do not know, but I do think that it did have consequences on my career, but I couldn't care less. I was suddenly this mother bird. I think I cared for her job more than she did. So that happens because, as much as we have expectations from the world, we also realize that our journeys have been paid forward by somebody, by the number of mothers and sisters who came before us, who worked for women empowerment, by the number of ancestors we have, by the entire ecosystem. Even those who were adversaries, they have paid it forward by making us tough. And it then falls on us to pay it forward. So I want to pay it forward with my vulnerability, because I think that is something that I have started to realize is the most precious gift I have to offer. Thank you, Ratna, for giving me this chance to talk about my vulnerability and my courage.
Oh, thank you, Sinjini, for sharing. And especially when it's such a personal story to share with someone, I've been broken. That's really brave, it's really courageous, but also inspiring to show that even when you're broken, you can get up again. The power, we have that power, we just don't think we do in that moment as well. So it's all about bravery. Thank you, Sinjini. Last but not least, Rekha. Rekha's, I know she's inspired a lot of people. I know she pushes the buttons to push people. And I know she's, exactly, I also know Rekha and I have grown up together as well. And I know where we came from. It's not always been easy, and against the odds, what she's also been able to achieve as a beautiful human being as well is just phenomenal, like everybody else on this call. But I know she touches a lot of people's lives as well. So, Rekha, either share something where you've really had to be daring and vulnerable, or advice to what would you say to somebody about just go for it. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, thank you for that very kind introduction. I will put that repeat on my phone just to give myself a nice mantra. So thank you for that. I take all gifts of kindness very seriously. I think just listening has been really emotionally invoking for me. I think when we talk about courage and vulnerability, there were so many stems that were connected across the screen. And, you know, for me, a lot of what has been described is that external courage and the description of the internal vulnerability. And for me, when we were posed this question as part of the session today, my immediate thought was, my gut reaction was, externally to the world, I'm deemed as quite courageous. I'll speak up, I'll stand up. It doesn't bother me. I've learned from a very young age that it comes with a price, and I'm more intrigued in what that price is. So I'm intrigued in doing it even more. I don't know if that's tenacious or argumentative or stubborn, but I'll take it in any form. Often women are deemed in certain categories. You know, being taught by strong values by parents, both mother and father particularly pushed the notion of my daughter is equal and not less than, has given me this kind of external push. So when I thought about courage and vulnerability, maybe because I'm linked more to the spiritual than the religious world, I thought of two animals. I felt like my external animal is more so like a, you know, an elephant, powerful but can be graceful, but also some, you know, black panther in there when I need to, or cheetah like chase the prey. But that internal creature is quite delicate. It's you know, me myself, you know, it's you know, I was thinking of a transparent fish that, you know, roams free in a colourful ocean, but it's got transparent skin. It's very gentle. If you touch it, it can hurt. And there's such two extremes to courage and vulnerability. That's how I deemed it in my head. And when I was thinking about an example, and it made me push my thought process, because the point of these sessions is to push ourselves and learn, and feeling trusted by other women that are powerful has made me think, actually, Rekha, what are you going to share? Because I can talk about standing up to CEOs, I can directors, dealing with people on the street who've been aggressive and violent to me. But actually, the thing that for me that is delicate and more private is my vulnerability, because that's not how I'm often perceived. And I think the great one example is as women who have had strong journeys, whether that be career, whether that be family choices, you know, making life changes, making, you know, starting your business, completely changing your career. I thought my vulnerability, my biggest vulnerability, has come from being vulnerable to my life partner. And when I mean vulnerable, I mean 1,000,000% vulnerable, because it was really difficult for me, as much as I love my husband and I've been with him 22 years. When I reflect back, I realised that at the beginning you hold back. And I always just thought, oh, that's how it's going to be. And there's been moments in our relationship where I've had to just let go. And I was the first few moments where that happened, whether that was a family issue or discussing having children, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. I had to actually let go. And I'd been brought up to that point. You don't let go, you stay in control, you have the power. As much as I love that human being, and I had respect for those, really, was I prepared to put myself in such a vulnerable position where I'm actually just emotionally, physically naked of everything, and allow somebody to take control of the journey and the reins? And to me, that was really, really hard. And sometimes I sit there, and I know this may sound stupid, but during COVID, I've sat there and thought, I've heard many people be challenged in their relationships and they broke down and the communication's not worked. And there's a whole host of reasons. And I know from my own mentoring of people in relationships that I've done, I've learned lessons. But you sit and you sort of think to yourself, if that happens to me, how will I cope? And what I've started to think is, when you are vulnerable and in a conscious state, as much as you can be, how resilient can you be? You can never prepare for anything, really, because you don't know how you're going to feel. But at least if I can evoke some emotion to take a deeper layer of that vulnerability, then I'm going to be the best I can be, and I can only do what I do. So some of the key things that I think about is, a lot of people have described fear, and I learned a long time ago, and it's bode me well, that fear is we've put fast forward on our phones or on a video. And fear is actually an amalgamation of everything we are apprehensive about, and it's straight in our face. And I've learned to slow that down and think, actually, fear is just an alert button to say, hold on a minute, and actually rewind and reframe that to ourselves. I think the silk thread that runs through all this conversation are those abilities to do that. And sometimes we don't take the time to validate the journey we've travelled until we have opportunities like this, which I hope many people will listen to, and take the nuggets that they want. But actually, what further level of learning can we take? And I think when we think about those internal vulnerabilities, we've all talked about them to various degrees, whether that be, Celia moving home, Susan talking about family as job I did, Siobhan talking about, I could lose my job, all those kind of things are drawn together by a silk thread. So we can take those opportunities to learn. So for me, that notion of courage and vulnerability is about that stopping and reflecting, but also taking the time to say, that instance and that experience has bode me well. It's given me some, war medals, if you like. You don't win every battle to win the war, but actually it takes a little bit of time. And like I think Sanjini said, where she needed to take that time out against the grain of what she's known, I should work, I should be, studious, I should do that. Actually, dimensionally move our train of thought, shine different light in ourselves to find out, actually, I'm an amazing prism. Wherever you shine that light gets a different version of me. I just didn't know. And I think if we can take that from the themes of courage and vulnerability in all our experiences, then we're going to be better versions of ourselves. Not the completed book. I'm not saying that. However, that chapter is very significant, and we should finger back to that page and remind ourselves that actually, let's thank our younger self for that journey. Because actually, I'm sat here today on the 29th of November, 22 years in a relationship that I actually was pushing away at the beginning because I was too scared to let somebody in. And that vulnerability hasn't really gone, because there's nothing I can guarantee for the future that this is going to work. But I can live in the hope that I've done the right thing to do the best I can in this moment. And that takes courage to be vulnerable. And I think that's what I wanted to share and sort of draw it all together, in that actually we're anchored and drawn together by that silk thread. So I think that's what I wanted to say to you all. And thank you for sharing, really, because it's made me pricked my emotions in different ways, which you can't buy at Sainsbury's or whichever famous food shop you have in any country. These are very, very precious gifts that, like I think it was Sanjini said, pay it forward, because I have nothing to give from a screen other than vulnerability and encouraging that courage for others. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. So thank you all. Hopefully I didn't go over my time.
No, I think it's great. You know, especially in this COVID time, you bring up such a really good point, Reka, about relationships, whether it's with your partners, with your children, with your friends, everybody, because it's all being tested as well. And, you know, COVID's really, you know, it's not nice, but it's also a blessing, I personally believe, because it's make you take stock of what are the things that I really fear? What's the worst thing that can happen to me? What's it going to be like being stuck in a relationship with a friend, with a partner, with my children? And by default, we've had the vulnerability brought to us as well. And I really like the fact that you shared something personal, Reka, today, because I know you do so much outside, but I think that's the level we have to go to as well. And that's a massive vulnerability that I've never seen from you before also. So look, all the ladies on here inspired Reka as well. That's amazing. That's amazing. I know we've had a lot to talk about today. I'm just going to share just a couple of things for myself. So being courageous and vulnerable, absolutely from a career point of view, the job that I do demands that you're courageous and that you're vulnerable. And most of the time my career's led in the way where I'm doing what somebody has never done before. You know, what they say in Star Trek, where no man, no woman has gone before. That's vulnerability. That's courageous. And in that room, I'm going, who am I to tell all these board of directors anything, or all these other people anything else? But my vulnerability is all about being a kind and compassionate person. And that kindness and compassion is what allows me to do the job the way that I do it right now as well. From a personal point of view, I'm absolutely still learning. I've had major things happen over the last few years for me, especially this year as well. The vulnerability to share some of my things from my childhood, what I'm going through in my life with my partner and my children at the moment as well. But Reka, when you said about the inner child, you know, I have this picture that somebody gave to me where there's a little baby lion, a baby cub at the front, and behind, many of you may have seen it, is the mother lion behind as well. And we're always looking for that external lioness to look after us as well. As we grow through life, our vulnerability can be that we actually look after ourselves. And I think, Reka, you said it really nicely. We can use our vulnerability to protect whatever's happened to us before and take absolute credit for all the courageous steps that each one of us has taken through all of our years. And I did something very beautiful with Celia last week. I just give you a headline of it. It was so powerful, where she said, look at all the different ages that you are right now. Go back to all of them and say thank you. And at what stage were you vulnerable? What made you vulnerable? And take that moment to recognize when you were in your darkest place, where you were so fearful that someone might say something, fearful that you may not get that job. I am still here in this moment. And that's what vulnerability is about as well. So thank you so much, ladies. I'm going to just close off with a quote about having the courage to be vulnerable absolutely transforms the way we live, the way we love, the way we lead, the way we parent. And courage is contagious. It absolutely is. I think all of the ladies have said that today as well. We need to create that atmosphere of being contagious, and then we can all be brave together, because we will inspire somebody else. Like all these beautiful ladies today with their stories, sharing their vulnerabilities, I hope have inspired, touched one person, many people. You will have linked to some of us and not linked to all of us, but I hope it's reached somebody today. Thank you, ladies.